All right, welcome to today's webinar, Whole Grains and Ancient Grains, a fit for positive nutrition in today's consumer trends. For those of you who aren't familiar with Oldways, we are a nonprofit nutrition education organization dedicated to improving public health by inspiring people to embrace the healthy and sustainable joys of the old ways of eating. We are best known for creating the Mediterranean Diet Pyramid in partnership with the Harvard School of Public Health, as well as for creating the Oldways Whole Grains Council. The Whole Grains Council is a program of Oldways. We help consumers find whole grains and understand their benefits. We help manufacturers and restaurants create more and better whole grain foods. And we help the media to write accurate and compelling stories about whole grains. You may also be familiar with our whole grain stamp, the packaging symbol that displays the gram amount of whole grain in one serving of a product. We have some really great speakers for you today. So I just wanted to go over some housekeeping notes. We are recording this session and we'll send you an email with the CPU certificate, the slides and the recording within about a week. For those of you who joined us last week, we're still working on getting that out. We should have it very soon. We're just waiting on one piece from one of last week's speakers. So you can learn more about our webinars online, oldwayspt.org/CPEU. And we do have another webinar coming up later this month that I hope you'll join us for. We will have time for a Q&A session with our speakers at the end of their presentation. So if you have questions in Zoom, there's a Q&A function. So if you could type your question in there, we will get through as many as we are able. And I would like to give a special thank you today to Ardent Mills for sponsoring this session. It's going to be really fantastic. So before I hand it over to our first speaker, I would love to tell you about both of the people joining us here today. Matt joined Ardent Mills in 2020 as Director of Insights and Analytics. In his role, Matt Schuler focuses on tracking, measuring, and identifying the stated and unstated factors that influence consumer behaviors within food and uncovers the resulting opportunities in the marketplace. Matt Schuler has more than 2 decades of experience in the food and beverage industry. Prior to joining Ardent Mills, he had multiple insight and analytics roles in food service and CPG spaces. We're also joined today by Dr. Lori Scanlon. Lori is principal scientist at Ardent Mills. She holds a doctorate in food science and human nutrition from Colorado State University and has worked in the food industry for over 25 years. Lori is the recipient of Product Development, Presentation, and Leadership Awards from the Institute of Food Technologists and Cereals and Grains Association, and is past chair of the Rocky Mountain Regional IFT. And so with that, I am going to turn it over to our first speaker, Mr. Matthew Schuler.
Thank you, Kelly, and good day, everyone. Thank you for joining us today to allow us to share some information about whole grains, ancient grains, and how they fit today's consumer trends. As Kelly indicated, my name is Matt Schuler. I work for Ardent Mills, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Dr. Lori Scanlon. First of all, just a very brief overview about Ardent Mills. Ardent Mills is an ingredient company and a flour milling company. We're headquartered in Denver, Colorado, where Lori and I are actually joining you today from our innovation kitchen. But we have a presence across North America that extends up into Canada, as well as Puerto Rico as well. We have 40 different locations across that geography where we focus on supporting our customers' opportunities when it comes to flours of all types, and then some specific opportunities when it comes to quinoa, some pulses, organic flours, and we have a very strong expertise in gluten-free products as well. I'd like to start today before turning over to Lori with some information about consumers. Obviously, it's been a remarkable 2.5, 3 years as it relates to what consumers have faced in the marketplace, but also how they've reacted. So we'd like to share some information about 5 particular mindsets that we've identified that are driving consumer food choices and how they relate to specific opportunities when it comes not only to whole grains, but specifically to ancient grains as well. So one of the things that we track through our proprietary research is sort of a macro idea that we think that consumers are empowered today, especially when it comes to food choices, like never before. Obviously, during COVID, or the peak of COVID in 2020, consumers were sort of on their back foot. They had to make food decisions that were sort of dictated to them. And we think that coming into this next year, that consumers have really decided that there's a strong purpose behind their choices when it comes to food, that they expect certain requirements out of the food choices that they are making. They have very individualistic interests, and they are not willing to make compromises. What they want is what they hope and expect to find. And quite honestly, the marketplace is adapting to the point where that they are finding those things. And we'll walk through a few of the things that consumers are prioritizing here in a second. But we'd love to start with this idea of eating healthy. Now, obviously, eating healthy has been on the radar for consumers for a long time. But we think one of the changes is that sense of empowerment is leading consumers to be very proactive. I should call out that the consumer information that I share today is all based on US consumers, 18 and older. But one of the things that we're seeing is sort of this proactive. Consumers are taking their food choices into their own hands and crafting their own solutions for what their goals and purpose behind their choices are. So just starting with the idea that about 9 out of 10 consumers, US consumers, tell us that they are actively or purposefully making choices to ensure that they are eating healthy. Now, obviously, eating healthy has a lot of different definitions, and that's one of the great things about consumers is that there are multiple ways that consumers construct their dietary habits to eat healthy. We've called out 5 here from an eating priority standpoint. Consumers have told us how important these 5 are to their overall eating goals and priorities. First of all, just a reminder, great tasting food remains absolutely mandatory. But one of the things that we're seeing is that consumers are saying, I want it to taste great. As a matter of fact, I require that it tastes great, but I want it to do other things as well. So making overall good, smart choices. More than 1/2 of consumers told us that is very important to the food and dietary decisions that they make. But I've highlighted 3 here that I think are sort of the emerging opportunities and a reflection of that proactiveness among consumers. Seeking ingredients, foods that you think are good for you. 1/2 of consumers claim that that has become a very important part of their dietary habits. Just a general idea that it's rich in vitamins or it's nutritious, again, a similar level. And then obviously avoiding ingredients in foods you think are bad for you also is a primary dietary habit among consumers. Avoiding things that consumers think are bad for them will never go away. But we're intrigued at Ardent Mills by the idea that consumers, a significantly higher percentage, indicate that seeking what's good about food, what helps them build their health toward their health objectives, has a significantly higher level of support and endorsement among consumers as a behavior that they are pursuing. I won't ask, this is a little bit of an eye chart. On a quarterly basis, we actually track between 40 or 50 different dietary behaviors. And I've got a slide here in a second that will pull out a few of the behaviors here. But this is a map that we create based on consumers' self-reported participation in different dietary behaviors. And it shows along the bottom from left to right where the scale is, the highest percentage of consumers indicating that they currently build their dietary behaviors around these types of habits and priorities. And then we are able to model out what we think the projected growth in participation is going to be. So from bottom to top would be where the higher growth is going to be. And we've highlighted in green a few of the opportunities we think are relevant today, hopefully to this audience, but certainly to grains and ancient grains and some of the work that Lori has done to bring them to life. Smart and good choices, again, that is a sort of an evergreen thing that consumers adhere to. And you could see that it is of large scale, but that it is slated for slower growth. While as you work back to more of the emerging and niche opportunities, we're seeing much more dynamic growth. And to put some numbers and scale to consumer reported participation in these behaviors, we've pulled out a few again that is a non-exhaustive list, but at the same time, we think relevant to today's topic. So one of the things is that this idea of behaviors where consumers are able to seek out the positive aspects of the food that they choose and include in their diets, not only has a sizable population that's currently participating, but from a growth and expected growth standpoint into next year, into 2023, some really great opportunities for some of these emerging dietary trends. So again, 70% of consumers tell us that they currently participate in the eating behavior that's around just making good choices or smart choices, whatever their definition might be. Whole grains, 1/2 of consumers say they purposely seek out whole grains within their dietary choices as well. And as we work down, you could see this idea of positive nutrition, which I think is important to call out, that is a self-defined definition among consumers, and consumers are likely to have varying degrees of knowledge when it comes to positive nutrition. But 1/3 of consumers tell us that this is something that they've actively consider when they're making dietary choices. Plant-based, at Ardent Mills, we also like to think in terms of plant forward, because I think, as most know, plant-based is not necessarily, it's inclusive of the vegetarian or the vegan diet, but it is not exclusive to the point where flexitarians aren't participating. These are consumers that are looking for positive aspects, whether it's for themselves, whether it's for animals and or the planet as well. And then just to call out, sustainability is a big trend within the food space right now. Our perspective is that consumers are still working to define what exactly that means, but we think it revolves around 3 fairly intuitive pillars, and that is people, process, and product. And they are looking for a combination that hits on all 3 of those different topics for them to feel like they are contributing to the sustainability movement. And then we've gone ahead and included just an example of a step back from a projection standpoint that certainly about half of consumers, so it's an established eating behavior, indicate that they indulge or treat themselves with no concern for wellness and health, but based on self-reported future behavior, we're projecting that that will actually diminish in 2023. And again, it comes down to the idea that consumers are looking from an empowerment standpoint for the positive things. They still will certainly indulge and treat, but there's an aspect of also having something good within that indulge treat. Good for them, good for the planet, good for the food process. You might ask yourself, what about inflation? We spend a lot of time thinking about that at Ardent Mills. Many of the dietary behaviors that that we've just outlined, or some of them at least, come at a premium price. And so we're trying to measure through what higher prices, what impact it might have on the commitment that consumers have to follow these particular dietary behaviors. And certainly higher prices, and for whatever is still to come ahead of us, will have a muting impact. But we think that it is going to be not complete, and also perhaps more shorter term, because consumers remain invested. In some ways, consumers are invested in their food choices in ways and to depths that they've never been before. Food these days is a badge. You know, saying that you eat organic means something and communicates something about yourself, both internally but also externally. Food is used, obviously, in a reactive way if you get sick. Wellness, trying to be proactive, whether it's immunity or digestive health or fiber. For pure out enjoyment, stress relief, there's a certain social currency around things like gluten-free. You know, some people are eating gluten-free. They're not quite sure why, but at the same time, they believe that they're making good decisions, and also people around them are being supported through the idea that it's just got some popular momentum. We're able to measure that about a third of consumers say, even if foods that support my health and wellness goals, whatever they might be, cost more, I will continue to spend that extra money. And that's compared to about half that level who said, actually, because of higher prices, I'm likely to make some compromises when it comes to the foods I choose, supporting my health and wellness goals. So obviously, there's probably a difficult time ahead when it comes to inflation, but this investment level from consumers, we think, will keep health and wellness and the decisions people make to support that through food choices will remain very strong. At Ardent Mills, our products actually make it into foods of all kinds. And I'd love to just share at a very, very high level, sort of an organizing framework that we've built off of our proprietary research that outlines 5 particular mindsets, consumer mindsets, that are emerging now and we think will play a role here over the next 12 to 18 months for consumers. The first one is functional foods. This is the idea when the consumer is in the mindset that they are actually looking for a functional benefit, a specific functional benefit from particular foods. Although we showed that taste always matters, this is actually a mindset where consumers are willing to compromise just a little bit. If the benefit is delivered, they are willing to give a little ground if the taste isn't there. Well and good is actually sort of an analog to that, where taste actually remains the primary motivator within that particular mindset, but they're looking for a real or perceived, sort of a self-defined sense that they made a good choice. And I will admit that this is sort of the mindset that I live in most often. So taste matters most, but if there's an opportunity to also feel like you've made a health and wellness choice that is good for you, then that is that particular mindset that the consumer connects with the food choices that they make. Modern craft actually is really about the eating and the culinary experience, but it's got layers that go beneath that. The idea here is that it's all about the food and the eating. It's about a safe adventure. So give me something that I'm familiar with, but push my boundaries a little bit, whether it be an ingredient, perhaps it's a prep technique, perhaps it's a cooking technique, or perhaps a claim. something that pushes my boundaries out a little bit, but that allows me to really experience something great. Transparency and authenticity is key in this. So whether it's a story or again, a claim or a history or equity behind a food product, this is what consumers are looking for in modern craft. Sustainable solutions, as we talked about a little bit ago, is the idea of supporting sustainability, making choices, food choices, that's about those three pillars, whether it be people, making the right choices when it comes to your food to support people within the food process, the product itself, whether it be organic or regen ag or other opportunities, fair trade, or the process. So product, people, and process are the three P's that drive sustainable solutions. And the last one, it's got a little bit of an awkward name, but our lives have been redefined, especially when it comes to food. Responsibilities are different. Life is a little bit more challenged. And so convenience and optimized performance. This is the consumer who says, make my life a little bit easier, but I am not willing to compromise on quality. I am looking for things like confidence, perhaps even safety and convenience, but my demands and my requirements remain in place. And we think that this is going to play a big role as the other four mindsets will moving forward. And then just a quick call out, consumers are fluid. These are not discrete mindsets. I would suggest to you that consumers adopt these perhaps on a weekly basis, switch in and out. Sometimes on a daily basis, they may occupy different mindsets that we've shared with you. And sometimes even within one particular meal occasion, they may be looking to meet the objectives and the drivers of these particular mindsets. We'd love to switch gears and share a little bit of information that we have around consumers and grains, because we do think that grains overall, ancient grains, which we'll share some specific information about, do actually ladder back to all five of those particular mindsets and even further back to this sense of empowerment when it comes to consumer decision-making these days. One quick look here, and then we'll move on from the mindsets, but we're actually hearing from consumers, and we've quantified the idea that consumers within the different mindsets actually have a different hierarchy when it comes to the types of grains and pulses that they're looking for. So consumers believe, at least, that they are savvy enough to gravitate towards either wheats, grains, or pulses, depending on what their particular objectives are within those mindsets. So a couple quick call outs here. Well and good. Grains are particularly well received across all five of these mindsets. Wheat is suppressed a little bit. There's still plenty of opportunity with wheat, but perhaps not as a surprise. Gluten-free and the wide scale popularity and momentum behind that right now does sort of limit it, at least from a reach standpoint. One of the interesting things about consumers is that they think they know a little bit more than they do know. So we recently, just to get an idea of consumer knowledge when it comes to different types of grains, asked consumers to tell us whether wheat, we actually had a longer list, we're showing three here, wheat, quinoa, or chia seed were a grain or not. And I think what this speaks to is that consumers at the top level are suggesting that they have strong interest in grain for a variety of reasons, but perhaps the opportunity to educate them, to connect the dots for them, whether it is manufacturers, whether it is ingredient companies, or whether it is some of the stakeholders that are in the audience today. There's an opportunity to raise the education level because the interest is there among consumers. We'd like to take a minute to talk about a specific segment of grains, and that is ancient grains. And perhaps you've heard of them. They've had a lot of momentum over the last several years and into the future. There actually, very interestingly enough, is no official definition. And believe it or not, this is the abbreviated version that I'd like to share to you today from Ardent Mills' view. So ancient grains, they're a category of grains or pseudo-cereal grains that have not been adopted into American diet as widely as sort of the big three: wheat, rice, or corn. Historically, they do have heritage and equity. They were grown and consumed by indigenous people and built their popularity within their respective regions. More broadly, over the last couple of years, ancient grains have actually gained popularity due to perceived nutritional and flavor profiles. There's a lot of mystique behind them. And examples of ancient grains include quinoa, which, at least by our measurement, is the best known and most adopted here in the United States, but buckwheat, sorghum, millet, spelt, and there are several others. And why we think that's relevant today is because they're commonly used and consumed in the whole grain form. I apologize for this chart, but it's less about the numbers and I think more about the opportunity. You can see that consumers give grains a high level of credit when it comes to nutritional value. But there is an opportunity, as we call out on the right-hand side of this slide, to really educate the consumer on some of the lesser known grains and the nutritional values that they bring to the table. So for example, teff, almost 1/2 of consumers say, I know of teff, but I'm not sure where it sits on the nutritional value scale. And you can see the above average scores for some of these lesser known grains as we work down this table, where there's just an opportunity to not only bring these grains to consumers, but also fill in some of the details about their nutritional value. And just to back that up, when awareness of ancient grains, the category or the term, is actually fairly strong. It's about 62% of consumers indicate that they're aware of ancient grains. Beyond quinoa, the awareness of the specific grains is much less. But what we are able to show is that consumers are very interested in sort of the background, what ancient grains bring to the equation, whether to their equation, to the foods that they might buy, either in food service or in retail, or what they might do from a benefit standpoint for the planet. So consumers report that they are most interested when it comes to ancient grains to learn any of the nutritional benefits. And if we link that to the slide we just showed, there's clearly a gap, an opportunity to be filled in by stakeholders to raise the level of understanding that consumers have when it comes to the nutritional benefits of ancient grains and whole grains, because the interest is there with consumers. So they're looking for it. The opportunity is for the industry to help them find it. Functional benefits are also of interest. And then obviously, what do they add to the eating experience? About 81% of consumers indicate that they would be very interested to learn what the ancient grains bring to the eating experience. You can see strong support for sustainability. Are there any advantages for the way that ancient grains are grown that might provide some payback for the planet, protect the planet a little bit? And then just the story overall, the history. Again, many of these ancient grains, by definition, have a rich and deep history, and one that's local, perhaps not always to the United States, an opportunity to sort of fill in that history and that heritage around these ancient grains. When consumers learn just a little bit about ancient grains, just the top level. Again, quinoa is very well known and is linked to ancient grains, but when you fill in some of the edges, almost 3/4 of consumers tell us that they are very or somewhat likely to eat more ancient grains here in the future. As they start to understand the specifics and those gaps are filled in, clearly there's an opportunity ahead for ancient grains as a category and some of the specific varieties within. Before I turn it over to Lori, I just wanted to sort of dimensionalize the opportunity, because for consumers, availability, knowledge is one thing, but availability of products is another. And so 58% of consumers overall indicate that they would be likely to buy food and consume food that includes ancient grain. And interestingly, they're just as interested, or just about as interested, in finding products in the grocery stores that includes ancient grains as an ingredient. So a chip, a cracker, breads. A little bit lower interest when it comes to a standalone dish. For example, quinoa is featured in very convenient pouch blends with other grains such as rice and other things. Restaurant items, again, here there's strong interest in ancient grains. 56% of consumers indicate they would buy, for example, a pizza that might have a buckwheat in the crust, or perhaps quinoa in the crust as well. And again, a standalone dish, just about one half of consumers indicate interest in buying perhaps an ancient grain salad or quinoa as a side dish rather than rice. So again, very strong interest within the consumer base, strong alignment with their dietary goals, and an opportunity to make that connection from the inside out to help educate and increase knowledge, and then obviously availability in the marketplace. Thank you. I'm about to turn it over to my colleague, Lori Scanlon, who will demonstrate how some of these ancient grains can be brought to life so that they can meet consumer interest. Lori?
Thanks, Matt. I just love the work that you do and what you're seeing. It's very inspiring for me, being in R&D, and exciting to see the consumer having more nutritious meals in their diet. And hello, everyone. Matt, if you don't mind advancing the slide for me. Thank you. Over the next section, I will showcase food concept ideas of how whole grains and ancient grains fit within the 5 consumer mind shifts that Matt has described. And we also call these drivers of innovation. And in R&D, we can use this type of approach to develop concepts and then real food prototypes, partnering with Matt and the consumer insight information to help our customers with nutritious solutions, to promote whole grains, and ultimately drive innovation to make new foods that consumers are seeking today. And so with concept number 1, it represents the functional food mindset, in which good food relates to good health, and that functional benefit is priority, even over taste. But we all know, as Matt said, that taste still matters. I chose a breakfast bite since there's no better way to start your day with a nutritious breakfast. Matt, do you agree?
I do, Lori. And something that's interesting about this particular opportunity, of course, is that we are seeing a big increase in breakfast at home, whether it be because the food service opportunities viewed as being a little bit more discretionary these days, and perhaps not within the household budget, but also with flex work. We have more consumers who are finding themselves at home in the early morning, reaching for something nutritious like this.
Thank you. And this breakfast bite will feature ancient grains, millet and teff, who are the Whole Grains Council's Grains of the Month for November. And they offer a wonderful visual and textural appeal in this bar, along with vitamins and minerals that consumers are seeking. Also in this bite is a sustagrain high fiber barley. And I love working with this flake because the barley provides beta glucan, which is the soluble fiber that supports heart health. And we even have an FDA approved claim around barley and heart health. So this is that type of functional benefit that the consumer is very much interested in. And when this concept is brought to life in a real prototype, then I'll certainly promote the X number of grams of whole grains. And I usually target at least 8 grams per rack, which is, of course, the reference amount customarily consumed. The next idea, number 2, represents the mindset of well and good, in which taste is most important, along with some level of real or perceived health benefit. And with this concept, I chose to elevate the classic blueberry muffin with plant-based protein and also make it gluten-free. And as Matt has told me before, the consumer, when it comes to gluten-free, it doesn't have to be identical, but it does have to taste great. And with this well and good, it absolutely has to taste great. And this muffin features Ardent Mills gluten-free all-purpose flour, along with toasted chickpea and toasted quinoa flours, in which the toasting improves the flavor. And the positive nutrition aspects come from calling out plant-based, gluten-free, and even highlighting star ingredients such as quinoa and chickpea. And when this concept is brought to life with a real muffin prototype, I would strive for a good source of protein, being plant-based, but not at the risk of taste. So that is something I would be striving for, and making sure that I don't sacrifice that taste that addresses the well and good consumer mindset. The next concept, number 3, represents the mindset of modern craft, in which eating experience is rooted in authenticity and backstories, and really pushing the envelope and the boundaries of new flavors. And so this concept, I am choosing an organic seasonal hearth bread. In our research, we've seen a very strong interest in ancient and heirloom wheats. And so this hearth bread features organic whole grain rye and whole grain spelt flours, which I love baking with these flours because they have rich histories and stories. And they also have amazing natural sweetness that offers flavors and colors and textures that are very unique. And when this concept turns into a prototype, I would likely promote 100% whole grain and maybe even long fermentation, which resonates. And of course, talk about the backstories of where the whole grain spelt wheat flour comes from and the rye flours originate. Concept number 4 represents sustainable solutions mindset, in which people, process, and planet are the priority, which Matt has explained. And with this idea, I am choosing to focus on the backstory of quinoa. The Mediterranean quinoa salad is not necessarily a new standalone dish, as 56% of consumers recognize quinoa for its protein and fiber, and many times replace this with whole grain brown rice in bowls because it's almost double the values of protein and fiber. And so quinoa has truly paved the way for interest in ancient grain over the last 2 decades. And so what is new in this case is that Colorado grown quinoa I'm focusing on in this concept has a tracked sustainability story. And we've seen that quinoa is a very profitable rotation crop for growers in Colorado. It promotes biodiversity, soil health, and water conservation. And in Colorado, with a dwindling Rio Grande aquifer system, we have seen that for every 1,000 acres of quinoa planted, 366 million gallons of water can be saved, which equates to 555 Olympic-sized swimming pools. So this has quite a story. And the last concept, number 5, represents convenience and optimized performance, in which convenience and confidence of the food choices go hand in hand. And so I chose an already successful bagel snack chip to further boost the positive nutrition, which will feature chickpea. Quinoa, I love quinoa. Will feature chickpea and whole grains wheat flour, in this case, ultra grain, which is a white wheat flour that tastes wonderful. and has a great texture. And there may be a bit of a disconnect in that most breads, bagels, snacks may already be perceived as plant-based. However, the opportunities exist to really deliver that positive nutrition the consumer is seeking with innovation in plant-based everything, ancient grains, gluten-free, or showcasing that star ingredients such as chickpea, quinoa, teff, millet. At the same time, deliver that new taste and textures the consumer is seeking today. I will hand it over to Matt.
Thank you, Lori. And I will tell you, I have had the pleasure of trying some of these prototypes and concepts, and they are delicious. That's the extent of information that we've brought to share today. Again, just to recap, we think whether they'd like to or not, that consumers are quickly emerging as far as their dietary habits go, and that we think whole grain will play a big role, as well as the ancient grains here in the future. And as Lori demonstrated, they can be brought to life in a very, very relevant and functional and delicious way. We'd love to answer any questions.
Thank you both so much for your presentation today. As a reminder, if you, our viewers, have questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A box. But I think we'll just dive into some of the questions that we've already received. I think to
mute,
start.
Kelly.
Oh, sorry. Did I cut you off, Lori? I think I will dive into some of these questions. So Matt, we had some questions about the demographics that you surveyed.
Great.
Could you share the age and also demographic makeup?
Yeah, thank you. The proprietary work that we do is, as I mentioned up front, is US only, consumers 18 or older, and then the sample is on key demographic metrics is balanced to the US Census. So it is US representative.
Thank you. And Lori, we had some questions about how you would tote in the blueberry muffin. Oh, sorry.
Lori is having some difficulty hearing you.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I can hear. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks. A couple of questions about how you toast the flowers for the blueberry muffin recipe. Could you share how someone could do that?
Yes, absolutely. So for home use, you can simply put the quinoa flour or chickpea flour spread out on a sheet pan and gently toast it. We have a toasting it, stirring it every 30 minutes for about an hour and a half to really drive away some of those beany, grassy notes that you tend to get in chickpea and quinoa, and still maintain the nutritional integrity and properties you're looking for in baking.
Great. And the recipe concepts that you presented, are those recipes available on your website or?
They are not yet because the concepts are in development, but I would love to be able to share those with you, Kelly, and you can share them with everyone.
Great. Yeah, so maybe
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Maybe we can send them one. I don't know. We'll see how far along the team gets, and we'll try and keep our viewers updated on where they can find those. Let's see. Do you have the nutritional data for your products available on your website?
No, most of our, if not all of our nutritional data, with the exception of some of our what we call IP items like sustragrain. Sustragrain has 3 times the beta glucan of oats, which is phenomenal. And one of the reasons I love working with it because of the flavor and that high beta glucan content. So something like that, we have analyses on that we manage, but the rest of our flours and grains, we use USDA information because it has very year over year maintains that nutritional integrity.
That's great. Thank you. And as a reminder, we love the USDA website. You can search if you just Google Food Data Central USDA. They have an excellent food search with thousands of products. Matt, we had a couple more questions about the survey.
Sure.
So for the 45% who indulge in treats without regard to health, was there any reference to how often they enjoy treats?
No, that is a great clarification. First of all, the information is rooted in work we just did in October. As I mentioned, we track it quarterly. Previously in June, we saw a slightly lower, but probably at parity level there. We don't capture frequency. We capture sort of the participation in the moment as well as future. So we also do capture whether people say they're going to stop participating or whether they're going to continue or whether they'll start. So the frequency there is not captured, but we think it sort of from an overall story standpoint that it hangs together. The idea that consumers are either going to stop just indulging for the or some consumers, I should say, just for the true indulgence, or we think probably more likely is within that well and good space, snack and indulge and treat, but with some element of perceived or real wellness.
Thank you. Lori, we had a quick question. What temperature would you recommend toasting the flour at? And could that be done in a toaster oven if there was a smaller quantity?
You mean the toasted chickpea and flour?
Yes.
Quinoa?
Yeah.
I would start under 300. You don't want it to brown excessively.
Thank you. Matt, were you able to capture socioeconomic status? And I guess part of that question too, how can people working in low-income communities, apply these findings to their work?
No, it's a thank you. A meaningful question, one that we candidly have not had the time yet to dig very deeply into. Very broadly, our perspective at Ardent Mills is that hopefully, and certainly quantitatively based on what consumers tell us, that consumers of all levels, whatever demographics or socioeconomic factors in which they might be classified, share this common goal, especially coming out of COVID, which obviously has been the crucible and the starting point for many of these trends, or at least the accelerator. We do think that as we measure it, that higher prices over the last obviously year, as well as what may still come, does put undue pressure for lower income or lower households with comparatively lower levels of income to be able to stretch up and make that organic purchase or seek out different snacks that might be sustainably supportive. So a long way of saying that we don't think that these mindsets necessarily, at least aspirationally or conceptually, have any boundaries around them. But in sort of pragmatic practice, we think probably over the next year that there may be some compression for folks who have to be a little bit more pragmatic about their spending and managing their household finances.
Thank you. Lori, there were a couple of questions about working with some of these ancient grain flours more generally in terms of like, you know, how to adjust recipes and how you go about your process in the test kitchen. But I guess like what I'd also like to hear about is, you know, sometimes we talk about like technical challenges of working with some of these ingredients that may not perform in the same way that an all-purpose ingredient would. But I would love to hear about like technical benefits too, and kind of, you know, are you getting interesting flavors? Are you getting like different performance applications? And yeah, just kind of your findings from the test kitchen.
Sure, that's well, I don't know where to start. I mean, I think every crop offers something amazing, and it's a matter of trying to work to understand what might be the best flavor pairing. Always, you know, with baking, especially hydration is the first step. If you have a starting recipe, which we in the R&D team usually have some foundation to start with, we're always going to look at water hydration first to see where we might need to make the adjustment if we're going to have an inclusion that might suck up a lot more water. And so the technical challenges, they're always there every single day, but that's what kind of is the fun for us, to overcome some of those. Some of the textures and flavors, I think is amazing that the consumer is so much more interested in trying new things than they were in the past, where we had to make everything very bland, very mild. That's a lot more challenging. So the consumer is more open to unique flavors. And so that has an advantages in itself. When you're talking about TEF, the grain of the month for Whole Grains Council, TEF, we've seen in our work that it ferments really beautifully. It's got an interesting texture. It offers some moistness to the product, and it makes some very good breads because of that fermentation ability. I mean, it's traditionally used in Ethiopia for injera, a fermented flatbread that we don't eat very often in the U.S., but we're utilizing that fermentation ability to make bread out of it. So it's hard to answer this question because it's complicated in ways, but at the end of the day, I really feel like you can make most everything taste great.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that was a really encouraging finding too, that Matt was presenting about, especially that modern craft mindset and people really being open-minded to embrace, new flavors that they might not have tried before, or new foods. And we did get a question about that. Is there any sense like if age was a factor in openness to want to try different whole grains?
We actually did look at that. One of the things that caught us or encouraged us was there was a potential hypothesis that age alone might be a discerning factor in not only awareness, but engagement or hopeful engagement, and that younger consumers might be the outliers. What we actually found is there's a fair amount of parity. We looked at sort of 5 to 8 year age groups, that there's a fair amount of parity. We didn't really see a whole lot of difference across ages when it comes to awareness. As a matter of fact, the younger consumers report higher levels of awareness of ancient grains that declines slightly as you move up the age. So, of course, we think that it's an opportunity for all ages. I think we all know, and it's perhaps an opportunity for another day, that the younger generations are eating their introductions to food is completely different, from generations that came before them, and that there's a real interest especially with that authenticity and accompanying benefits, whether it be sustainability, those do have some momentum with younger consumers as well.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think this is a great opportunity for us as dietitians to really nurture that mindset and continue to work with our patients and clients to kind of nudge them forward on their journey to healthier eating and again, continue to reiterate some of this messaging. We saw that consumers are looking for foods that are better for them. They are looking for foods that have vitamins and minerals that are good for the planet, that are functional. But I think it seems like where the disconnect is that maybe they're not recognizing that whole grains and ancient grains check all these boxes. Oh, and we have some very encouraging comments, people writing in. They're working with young people who are very interested in ancient grains. So that's so great.
That is great.
And I guess, you know, before we wrap up, do you have any closing messages, either of you, about, you know, how people can work with you, or any other words of encouragement as we try to create more whole grain eaters?
I'll lead if that's all right, Lori. No, I would just like to express thanks again. You know, Ardent Mills, our core value is nourishing what's next. And we believe it, and we hope on a daily basis that we act towards it. We have opportunity to support customers in a wide variety of marketplace opportunities, food service or elsewhere in retail. And so, so thanks for letting us share a little bit of information. And if there's any follow-up either through Kelly or you can find us at ardentmills.com. Lori?
Thanks, Matt. And I want to just thank the audience. Matt and I were really excited to present to Oldways Whole Grains Council and the members, because we know we're like-minded, and we're at the end of the day really just hoping that people will continue on the path to take health and empowered to select great tasting foods, nutritious foods, and at the end of the day, we'll all be better off.
Thank you.
And if you want to reach out, Lori.Scanlon, Laurie.Scanlon, SCANLIN at ardentmills.com. I saw that there was a request in the chat for our email address, and please reach out, and would love to talk with you further about ancient grains, whole grains, and baking.
Thank you. And we will be sending everyone the recording and the slides within a week or so. So check your inboxes. And thank you both so much. And thank you to Ardent Mills for sponsoring this session. Goodbye, everyone.